Do you ever feel weak? Like things are slowing down, your memory slips, your body doesn't move like it used to, and it's harder to keep up? Are you really getting old? Or maybe what you need isn't just a younger body, but a stronger mindset? No one shows us how to defy age better than anime's toughest old men. These 9 grandpas show that age doesn't make you weak. Their strength is so broken, you won't believe what they managed to accomplish. But what's the real mindset that keeps these men unbeatable, even when their bodies fail them? Starting with Monkey D. Garp, 78 years old and stronger than most men half his age. No devil fruit power in his blood, just raw, unstoppable strength. A power forged from a lifetime of hardcore training, discipline, and a mind tough enough to face what others wouldn't dare stand against. That's why enemies feared him like a natural disaster. A man past his prime, but still strong enough to single-handedly wipe out an entire island if he had to. A man who trained so relentlessly he reached a strength that deserved to be called the hero of the Marines. A man who fought beside the Pirate King and stood as his equal, but every bit of that strength came with a weight they never saw. Regrets he didn't bury, choices that tore him in two. A choice between duty and family, loyalty and freedom. He faced it all and kept moving forward, turning that weight into the very thing that made him unshakable. This was a man who didn't get power handed to him. He built it, one scar at a time. He pushed himself to the point where battleships cracked under his fists, not for glory, but because pushing himself was the only way he knew to stay ready for the world. And when he wasn't pushing himself, he pushed others too. He trained Marines like Kobe the same way, rough, honest, and relentless, because that's how you get people ready for a world that never pulls its punches. Others had devil fruits or gifts they stumbled into. Garp had discipline, he had stubbornness, he had the kind of will you can't fake, the fist of love that knocked sense into enemies and family alike. He was loud, brash, quick to laugh, the same man who could fall asleep mid-sentence and wake up ready to flatten an entire fleet of pirates. He raised revolutionaries, he raised 2 strong pirates and a future pirate king. And he stayed with the Marines anyway, loyal to the people under his command, even when his family ran straight into the storm he spent his life fighting. He laughed at kings, he hated the celestial dragons and never hit it. He turned down the admiral's coat more than once because he refused to let corrupt power dictate what he stood for. That was his mindset. You don't need a title to do what's right. You need guts, and you need your own code to live by. He trained his grandsons the same way he trained himself. Brutal, relentless, honest. To most people, that was cruel. But to Garp, it was real love, giving them the toughness to survive a world that eats the soft alive. Strength to him was freedom, and freedom was worth every scar. He didn't put blind faith in the system. He knew the Marines were flawed, the world government rotten at its core. But he stayed because someone had to stand between chaos and the kids who would grow up to fix it. He believed in the future more than he trusted the present, and that belief shaped everything he did. He never told people to protect him, he told them to protect the future. He knew that your real legacy isn't what you hold on to, it's what you're willing to let go of so the next generation can rise higher. He could have sat down, given up, let the regrets drown him, but he didn't. When enemies closed in, outnumbered, outmatched, outgunned, he didn't flinch, he laughed. He knew he was only human, but he showed the world that the greatest strength is the will that refuses to bow. Garp is proof that power isn't about what you're given, it's about what you build in your head when everything outside you falls apart. He fell, he failed, he lost people he loved, but he never stayed down. He carried every scar and kept swinging, not just for himself, but for the kids who'd come after him. Loud, stubborn, unstoppable. That's not just Garp. That's what anyone can be if they choose discipline over excuses, honesty over comfort, and tomorrow over yesterday's regrets. But not all legends wear a uniform or swear to a code. Sometimes people brand them as fools, perverts, failed heroes. like Jiraiya, the wandering sage. But what they missed was everything he carried behind that grin. The students he guided, the monsters he faced, the choices that haunted him when the world wasn't looking. He could have let regret break him. The friend who betrayed him, the student who called himself a god and brought the whole village to its knees, the countless lives lost on the road he walked. But he didn't quit. When Orochimaru turned his back on everything, Jiraiya chased him down, not to kill him, but to try to bring him home. When his village was in ruins, he didn't hide behind a desk. He went searching for answers alone if he had to. When the boy he pinned his hopes on became pain itself, he didn't curse the prophecy. He didn't run. He faced pain with nothing but an old teacher's hope and the belief that if you keep giving, your story might help someone else change theirs. His body failed him, arm torn off, throat crushed, the world fading around him. And still he forced his dying hand to write the code that would help Naruto find the truth, because real teachers don't die with lessons locked inside. He lived like a fool on purpose, open enough to be laughed at, kind enough to be betrayed, stubborn enough to believe people could change. And that's the part we forget. Jiraiya didn't believe in destiny. He believed you fight it every day by staying open, staying honest, staying human. He carried his scars like proof you can love people even when they break your heart. He wrote stories about underdogs because he wanted kids to know they could break the cycle they were born into. He taught the village's greatest Hokage. He shaped the one who'd change the world for good. He died alone, but he made sure no one else had to be alone after him. So learn from Jiraiya, a man who turned every failure into a lesson, who stayed soft enough to care, stubborn enough to stand up again when every reason said to stay down. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is live, so your story makes it easier for someone else to finish theirs. Jiraiya might have been famous for peaking, but he wasn't alone. Turns out, the world's oldest perverts can also be their best teachers. And that's Master Roshi, the turtle hermit, the old man who trained Goku, Krillin, Yamcha, and plenty more who still used what he taught them. Lessons from an old man who never acted his age. Hundreds of battles behind him, yet when universes were on the line, he didn't sit back and watch. He stepped into the tournament of power, long past his prime, but with one advantage those younger fighters didn't have: a mind sharpened by decades of hard-earned wisdom. He used every skill he'd spent years mastering, even when his body begged him to stop. And when he fell, he got back up, not for praise, but to show his students you don't quit just because the world says you should. Roshi never pretended to be perfect. He knew his flaws, the perversion, the pride, but he never let them own him. He knew real strength wasn't just throwing punches. It was catching yourself when your old habits tried to pull you backwards and refusing to stay the same man you were yesterday. He didn't cling to old titles or past glory. When his students outgrew him, he didn't drag them back. He pushed them further. And he was humble enough to learn from them too. Proof that real masters stay students for life. That's the mindset. You don't stop growing just because your hair's turned white. You adapt, you refine, you stay curious. Discipline doesn't retire, and growth doesn't quit. Though not all teachers are as playful as Master Roshi, there are some that are way more ruthless and straight up brutal, like Yamamoto Ganusai, 1,000 years old, and people still respected him. A blade so fierce it could scorch armies and reshape the battlefield around him. Scars covered him, each one a reminder that no enemy, no betrayal, no passing century could break him. He didn't just fight wars, he built an entire order to stand guard when he couldn't swing his sword forever. He trained generations under him, taught them to hold the line even when the world fell apart. And when that world tested him again after 1,000 years of uneasy peace, he didn't hide behind his rank. He stepped out front, alone. They called him merciless when he was young, a killer, a monster. But that ruthlessness had a point. Peace takes a hard hand, and sometimes you have to give up mercy to keep it. That was Yamamoto's mindset. You don't cling to old glory. You don't trust titles or tradition to save you. You do the job yourself, blade in hand, so your students don't have to carry the burden before they're ready. He knew peace could make you soft. He watched himself grow softer and paid for it when the enemy outsmarted him. But he still showed up, even when he knew the cost. When Yuhavach came back, the same enemy he fought 1,000 years ago, Yamamoto didn't send someone else. He didn't run. He brought out Zanka no Tachi, the fire that could erase anything it touched, even if it meant burning himself to ash. In the end, they took his flames, but they didn't break what he stood for. Yamamoto proves you'll get older, you'll slow down, but you don't let that turn you soft. You keep your edge sharp. You teach the ones under you how to stand their ground even when it costs you everything. And when it's your turn to fall, you face it head on. But what does it take to stay dangerous when the world calls you old? It takes a man like Zeno Zeldic, 67 years old, a bent back, silver hair, and a mind that's always 2 steps ahead of anyone stupid enough to come for him. He was born into a world of blood and secrets. The Zeldic family raised him to be a living weapon. But what makes Zeno terrifying isn't just his power, it's the way he keeps his blade clean. He never kills for pride. Never for sport. He does the job. No wasted motion, no extra collateral. Then he disappears into the shadows. No glory needed. Most men would get numbed after decades in the dark. Zeno didn't. He still feels the weight of an innocent life taken by mistake. He owns that guilt because he knows what too many forget. Real killers don't brag about it. They carry it. They get it done and get out. That's the lesson under his calm. Do what you must, but never more than you have to. Stay sharp, stay precise, no bluff, no bluster. If you can't stand by your code when it gets ugly, then it was never your code to begin with. He fought monsters that could crush cities, faced chimera ants, the phantom trope, sat at Neero's side and made kings bleed. And even when he's outgunned, he doesn't flinch, because he knows where his line is and what it takes to cross it. But what really sets him apart is what he leaves behind. He doesn't chain his grandson Killua to the old ways. He shows him the family craft, then lets him decide what to do with it. Zeno knows that power you can't hand off is power wasted. You teach, you trust, then you get out of the way. No big speeches, no hero mask, just a lifetime of watching, learning, moving like a ghost when the world's not looking. If you learn anything from Zeno, it's this. Age can make you sloppy, or it can make you sharper than any blade you carry. Experience is worthless if you don't stay curious. Principles are worthless if you drop them when they're inconvenient. Zeno Zeldic never stopped choosing discipline over ego, precision over pride. He never wasted a move or a lesson. He's proof that old doesn't mean obsolete. Old means you've seen enough to know exactly when to strike, and when to let the next one rise higher than you did. But what do you call a man who holds the same edge and laughs at the world while he does it? Like Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King. Once he was the right hand of the Pirate King, sailing unconquered seas, laughing in the face of storms and battle. Now his hair's gone white, and he'll joke about how the blade feels heavier or how old scars remind him rain's coming. He laughs it off because that's what you do when you've lived long enough to earn those aches. But old doesn't mean done. When the time came, he still stood between an admiral and a kid who'd yet to see what he could become. He faced Blackbeard, an emperor of the sea, and made him back down with nothing but his mere presence. Not to show off, not to hold on to glory, just to buy the next generation a chance to stand on their own feet. Rayleigh doesn't romanticize freedom, he just lives it. A quiet dog, cheap rum, a ship he patches up himself. He remembers exactly how his journey started. His house burned down, so he lived alone on a boat until Roger found him and called it fate. They built everything from scratch. A ship, a crew, a life that took them further than they ever thought they'd go. Rayleigh knows you can't bluff your way through a life like that. So when he trained Luffy, he didn't hand him easy answers. He taught him to take the hits and keep moving. The world doesn't bend for you. You get strong enough to face it anyway. And he fights it in his own way. That's what staying sharp really is. Not pretending you're still 20, but knowing what you can do, even when your body aches. Keeping your blade clean, keeping your heart clear, leaving the world better than you found it. even if it's just by giving someone else the time to learn how to live free too. Freedom has its price, and sometimes it takes an old monster to make kings who think they're gods pay it. That's Isaac Netero, a man once called the strongest nen user alive, not in his youth, but in his final years. At over 100, Netero laughed in the face of a king who believed he stood above mankind. This was the man who, at 46, climbed a mountain every day just to kneel in gratitude 10,000 times. It's said that by the time he came down, his fists moved faster than sound, and his spirit moved faster than fear. Most men would have retired with that power, but Netero only grew more dangerous with time. He spent decades as chairman of the Hunter Association, protecting a world full of monsters, murderers, and men who'd sell their souls for a wish. He could have hidden behind that title, but when the greatest threat his world had ever seen appeared, the Chimera Ant King, Netero didn't send an army. He didn't run. He walked into that ant's palace with a smile. He summoned the bodhisattva he'd spent a lifetime punching toward, and when the king asked why he fought, Netero only laughed, admitting he'd lived so long just to find someone stronger than himself. And when even his fists weren't enough, when the king's blow took his arm and leg and broke his body, he showed the ultimate truth of old warriors. Strength isn't just muscle or skill. Strength is resolve. Netero sacrificed himself, detonating the final ace he'd hidden inside his own heart, so the next generation wouldn't have to kneel before monsters without a fight. Netero proves your body may age, your hair may be gray, your pulse may slow, but your will, if you forged it through decades of training, gratitude, and grit, can outlast your flesh. Netero faced a king who called himself a god, but what do you do when the monsters are the ones you raised yourself? Like Hiruzen Sarutobi, the professor, the god of shinobi, a man who lived long enough to teach the greatest heroes and the worst monsters his village would ever know. Hiruzen was there from the beginning, a child prodigy trained by the first and second Hokage themselves. When the second fell, Hiruzen stepped forward, not because he wanted power, but because someone had to carry the will of fire. He led Konoha through war after war, peace after fragile peace. He protected the village from enemies outside its walls, and from the darkness that sometimes grew within it. He raised the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, hoping each would be a successor. He called Orochimaru his greatest pride and his deepest regret. He believed in the good inside his students so fiercely that it broke his heart when that faith was betrayed. He could have turned cold. He could have ruled with fear and iron, but Hiruzen stayed gentle, even when it cost him. He never stopped trying to guide Konoha like a family, scolding one generation, nurturing the next, always hoping they would carry the flame higher than he could. When Orochimaru invaded, Hiruzen was old, his chakra weaker, his body slower. But when his village was facing destruction, he took up the staff and faced the first and second Hokage brought back from the grave. His own mentors turned into puppets. He knew he couldn't win, but he fought anyway. He faced his most beloved student with tears in his eyes, determined to seal away at least one more evil before he died. He gave his life to cripple Orochimaru's power, sealing away his arms so the man who betrayed his kindness would never wield that power again. And as his final breath left him, Hiruzen was still thinking about Konoha, hoping the next generation would learn from both his failures and his love. Hiruzen reminds you that wisdom isn't about being perfect, and strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up in the middle of your mistakes and protecting what you still have left. No matter how many betrayals cut into you, you keep showing up for the ones who still believe. Even the scars can become lessons if you're brave enough to carry them. Though not every old guy in anime is as fearsome as the man they called the strongest man in the world, Edward Newgate, better known as Whitebeard. They called him a monster, an emperor, a man with the power to destroy the world. But underneath the scars, the power and the legend, Whitebeard just wanted one thing: a family. He was just an orphan from a village so poor they couldn't even pay tribute to the world government. He became a pirate not to hoard gold or crowns, but to gather enough riches to feed the people he left behind. Even when he rose to the top of the pirate world, when people whispered his name in fear, Whitebeard cared more about the sons at his side than the treasure at his feet. He could have claimed the One Piece for himself. He could have fought Roger to the death, but he didn't. Instead, he laughed with his greatest rival and chose his own path. He raised dozens of sons on the sea, taking in broken men and castaways under his massive white flag, promising them a home where no one would ever call them worthless again. When Ace was captured, Whitebeard didn't hesitate. Sick and aging, he set sail anyway, ready to shake the world for his son. At Marineford, he was shot, stabbed, and had half his face blown away. Even when Blackbeard betrayed him and shot him, Whitebeard never fell to his knees. He died standing. His back stayed free of wounds. And with his final breath, he roared to the world that Roger's treasure was real, because he knew the next generation needed one last spark to chase freedom, to fight for their dreams. Whitebeard reminds you it doesn't matter how many scars you carry. It doesn't matter if your body's falling apart and your bones scream with every step. If your heart still beats for something bigger than yourself, you're never done. Whitebeard didn't die as a pirate, he died as a father. These men have scars in common, but more than that, they have resolve. They prove that age doesn't make you weak, it makes you sharper if you choose to stay dangerous. These old legends each have a lesson, that discipline beats comfort, love isn't always gentle, and your real legacy is what you're willing to lose so others can stand on their own.